passed away. While Tosui was making vinegar, one of the beggars gave him a picture of the Buddha. Tosui hung it on the wall of his hut and put a sign beside it. The sign read, "Mr. Amida Buddha, this little room is quite narrow. I can let you remain as a transient, but don't think I'm asking you to help me to be reborn in your paradise." Shoichi was a one-eyed teacher of Zen, sparkling with enlightenment. He taught his disciples in Tofuku Temple. Day and night, the whole temple stood in silence. There was no sound at all. Even the reciting of sutras was abolished by the teacher. His pupils had nothing to do but meditate. When the master passed away, an old neighbor heard the ringing of bells and the recitation of sutras. Then she knew Shoichi had gone. Buddha said, "I consider the positions of kings and rulers as that of dust motes. I observe treasures of gold and gems as so many bricks and pebbles. I look upon the finest silken robes as tattered rags. I see myriad worlds of the universe as small seeds of fruit, and the greatest lake in India as a drop of oil on my foot. I perceive the teachings of the world to be the illusion of magicians. I discern the highest conception of emancipation as a golden brocade in a dream, and view the holy path of the illuminated ones as flowers appearing in one's eyes. I see meditation as a pillar of a mountain, nirvana as a nightmare of daytime. I look upon the judgment of right and wrong as the serpentine dance of a dragon, and the rise and fall of beliefs as but traces left by the four seasons." Nan-in, a Japanese master during the Meiji era, received a university professor who came to inquire about Zen. Nan-in served tea. He poured his visitor's cup full, then kept on pouring. The professor watched the overflow until he no longer could restrain himself. "It is overfull, no more will go in." "Like this cup," Nan-in said. "You were full of your own opinions."
Statistically, very much, yeah. Very much so.
Hold on, bro. The biggest knock on the VA was like the inefficiency of it. Like, you take forever, you're not this, you're not service this, and then they offered this thing where if it rises to this whatever, you can go outside of the network and go out to, privatized hospitals and things like that, and they would pay for it, right?
Yeah, so it's more expensive.
Wait, hold on. But which is more efficient, though? Is it the private? Because I think that's what's in question. Is the private hospitals more efficient than the VA hospitals?
Well, if you're a taxpayer, you want it to be less expensive and more efficient. So figure out how to do that, not just make it more expensive.
We're just struggling to wrap our head around the public option being less efficient. Or sorry, more efficient, less expensive.
Biden hired 80,000 in 2019, and now they're trying to reduce it back to 2019 numbers, so they got to get rid of 80,000. And the reason he hired them is because he said for vets that have chronic illness, we need more nurses and staff to cover the chronicness of it, because they're going to be in the hospital longer. And so they hired a bunch, and now they're trying to lay that group off. I don't know. I'm not backing Trump or Doge on some of the shit, obviously.
I think it makes sense. I think that if you have to hire these many people because of COVID or for whatever the reason is, right? And now that isn't an urgent, situation to address, that you gotta put people back out there.
No, the VA wasn't, because the issues with the VA weren't about COVID.
Right.
It was more about just general issues with the VA. So you either ramp up and invest more into the VA to make it more efficient and to make it better, or you kind of privatize it. And the goal or the outcomes in privatization of health insurance is that a Medicare, Medicaid have like a 3% overhead of sort of for the administration of it, whereas private insurance have about 11% overhead. So in general, these government-run medical systems are more efficient than privately run ones.
But would it just be a private entity that was government?
Yes, cost efficient.
Cost.
I'm familiar with a few things that the government does in a less costly way than the free market.
Yo, y'all need to stop talking shit about the government. The government is fucking awesome. The only problem is we let it run amok. If we had balls like our forefathers did, the black ones, not the white ones.
Are you
we
at
would
Starbucks right now? I hear the music.
Don, you see why we have beef, Don?
I'm sorry, you're right. Go ahead.
Anyway, all we gotta do is get the government in order, and then we can have Utopia.
Nobody's ever come up with that one before, concrete. I think you're on to something.
Listen.
With the VA outsourcing, like allowing you to go to different places, it sounds great, but it's really not that efficient because you're expecting the VA is going to cover it, and with all of the red tape at the VA, give you an example with my dad. He recently went through a couple amputations, and he got sent out for inpatient rehab. The VA sent him. He didn't say, "Oh, I want to go." They said, "You're gonna go here, right?" So he went. He had one amputation. Then they sent him to the rehab to do the inpatient rehabilitation, right? Then the wound wasn't healing. He needed a second amputation, so they sent him back to the VA to do the second amputation. After the second amputation, he went back to an inpatient rehab, not owned by the VA. What happened after that? My parents got a bill in the mail from the VA saying that they weren't going to cover the first at the VA and all that, talk to them, fight with them about it, like, hey, you sent him there. What do you mean you're not going to cover it? So it sounds easy. Oh, you can just go out. You can go outsource and go to different doctors. No, it's not that easy. They're wildly inefficient, and going outside the VA makes it more and more likely you're going to have to deal with a bunch of crap.
That's true.
But does that usually have to do with the fact
They're
that
still fighting with them actually over it.
That's usually just getting the VA to play ball, though, right? That's not like the private entity that's causing those hangups.
It's the VA being
get their shit together. Yeah, that's what I mean. So less VA involvement and handing it more over to the private sector and making a more streamlined process by which the VA can cover the bill is a better solution than getting just not going outside and sticking with the VA and getting put in a facility where they issue you a back to beat the rats.
Why not just give it to the VA? What are you talking about? This is bullshit. It's bullshit, right? It's a government entity. It's not a fucking private entity. You're like pro-private prison because you're about the bottom line. We're talking about chronic conditions with stuff. She's talking about amputation. You're busy trying to get the bottom line down. And the point is that they're saying more vets now, not just COVID in general, can use more, not less, right?
Well, this is what I'm saying, though. It's like the government should foot the bill. The government should provide the insurance. But there's no reason why they can't outsource the services to the private sector.
Well, the reason they wouldn't is because they're also trying to drop regulation on all sorts of shit. So then hospitals that are nominally government, but they're sourced out like private prisons, they can abuse the fuck out of them because they're dropping regulations. So more abuse happens, right? I mean, we'll see what happens. But I just know the VA's.
How do you feel about fat black people?
It's impacted, maybe you're not feeling it.
Right, but this is an example, though, I think Stilgar's pointing out that if we could just handle this funding part of it, it'd be a good thing.
But it's not that dry because you're going to come across those problems like her mother had more and more often. It's not a quick fix.
But when we
This
say
implies that there
handle
are
it,
problems with the VA. This implies that the VA is not woefully inefficient and has had terrible outcomes for the last 60 years. And that's part of the problem here. It's that's the reality of the VA. The VA, at scale, from the 10,000 foot view, yes, sure, some folks may have had positive anecdotal experiences, but largely the VA is pretty fucked. It's let down people time and time again. They're pretty resistant to expanding their treatment modalities. It took how long for them to be in approval for letting people use medical marijuana instead of just putting them on fucking SSRIs and benzodiazepines. The VA's whole modus operandi is hey, how can we give you enough pills to kill yourself and also assign you a doctor that most closely comports with the enemy combatant of wherever you served? You're in Vietnam, here's a guy in a rice hat.
Well, you're literally going to get the same doctors outside too. That's a whole, that's a different thing. But you said the thing about medical marijuana. Is that still the policy?
They've now walked it back. Yeah, they now allow people to have VA care. So let's hypothetically within a recreational state.
It got better and changed with industry.
Yes, over a tremendously long amount of time that was wildly inefficient. Should have happened way sooner. So if you lived in a state where medical marijuana was legalized and you found that it was more efficacious for treating your own pain symptoms rather than huge amounts of Percocets, you could be denied care from the VA as a result of having a positive test for cannabis. This makes no sense. It's stupid. And it's government inefficiency. And these are the sorts of problems that are perpetuated with the VA.
They're going to strip around some of the administrators also. They're taking down administrators also, right? It's kind of happening all at once. So they're going to get reformed one way or the other. So I do agree with that. I do agree with your complaint on it. They have tons of insufficiencies, and maybe that's the virtue of Doge in this particular respect. But as far as throwing away all the nurses and the ground staff, that's just collateral damage as far as I can tell. But they got to do it anyway because they want to take out 80,000 across 50 states.
Yeah, and look, most of those people are going to be fine. They're probably going to receive significantly lower pay rate, but that's because the market pay rate is significantly lower and more tied with reality than what a GS number gets you. And that's the reason why most of these people want to work for the VA, because they pay significantly more than the going rate for whatever the position is. And this is another argument against this idea that it's an efficient and reasonable use of our time.
I have a question. If the mafia came back into existence and we're all hanging out and we say, hey, look, mafia bosses, this whole mafia thing, we're not really down for it. A lot of us are suffering. So we want to exchange you out and we want to put good people in your place, right? And then we find some good-hearted people and we put them ahead of the mafia. In what world would any of you be okay with it at that point? Mafia is still going to operate the way that it operates. But now we just have somebody that's and we all agree that this person is a genuine, good-hearted person. But now he is ahead of the mafia. All the policies, regulation, legislation, everything stays the same. But we have a good guy that's ahead of the mafia, that's ahead of the mafia bosses. Does that make sense to anybody?
No.
What's the
I appreciate it. No, I'm glad. I hope it does make sense. So I think people saying oh, we just need to, we have to either drain the swamp, or we have to get a hold of the government, or we have to make our little fixes. We need to campaign for the people that we really believe are going to bring change, and blah, 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 blah. I think that you're missing the entire point of what government is. Government is injustice. It's this crazy, magical, fucking fantasy belief that people are going to get some rights that nobody else has. The government doing that, right?
Do you understand how
violence with more violence? But hold on, but this is what I'm saying. I think there's an incredible to think that government is going to fix injustice. government is the permission slip for fucking evil.
I appreciate your advocacy for an ANCAP utopia, but that's quite a leap from
It's just,
the
hold on,
conversation
you
about the
don't
VA.
have to.
Oh,
No, because I was just waiting to grab in. I wasn't done. I wanted to.
Yeah, but what you're talking about is like a completely different topic. You're talking about like the dissolving of the federal government, which cool, I'm with